next hour how to compose. The truth is that this is an impossible task, but what we can do is we can find out where you are in your creative journey. Use that as a jumping off place, because here is my thought about composition. Especially, I think, in this room we will be talking about sacred composition. I believe that we're all gifted in that area. There's so much that we have been given as the language of music, as interpreters. And it is, I have discovered the same thing, because I came to composition through the performing art of reinterpreting other people's dots and dashes. And it is the same dynamic. It is a different, whole different thing, but it is part of the same unction to start formulating your own thoughts. It's a little bit like, and if you're just starting your composition, I think you'll discover this. Maybe if you've been composing for a while, you're at the point where you could agree with this or disagree, but I took French for 22 years. Finally got to level 2. I guess my accent and parlez-vous français don't go very well, but I did get to enjoy trying to learn that. A wonderful language. And I can remember at one point there were a series of phrases where I actually began to think of it in French. I didn't translate. I went to a restaurant and I ordered something, and I just ordered it. I ordered it in French, and it didn't require for me to analyze it and evaluate it and go through that process of making sure that I conjugated. I mean, I just blurted it out and got my omelette du fromage, And it was an interesting jolt to me. And I think composition is a little bit like that. At first, you learn like a child, imitating and listening and watching lips and parents' inflections and gestures. And in the case of composition, it's looking at people's music that you performed and enjoy. And that's where you're going to jump off into this process. You're going to write what you like. And then that vocabulary grows and expands and becomes more significant. And you end up, one day sitting down, and it's not imitating Marquez or it's not imitating Dan Forrest. It's literally your own thought, maybe inspired by your experiences with the writers you care for, and then you're hooked. So my advice is don't get to that place, because then there's nothing else to do you but to write. It's so invigorating. And I mentioned this at lunch, but whether or not you ever get published or not, you will be rewarded with the time you spend struggling, contending for the notation of your compositions, particularly in the sacred realm, because what composition does for us is it slows everything down. We listen to, what was that, Give to the Winds Your Fears, the last piece that we just did. That piece probably goes 4.5 minutes, 5 minutes maybe, if you don't take the optimal tempo, perhaps, maybe 5.5. And it's over with. And you have to get it in real time.
Did you pass this?
I did not.
Okay, I'm still.
Okay, thank you. Can't find my glasses. I know I had them in the. I drew it. What was I saying?
Real time.
5.5 minutes.
Oh, 5.5 minutes. And then it's it. You get it in real time. When you compose, it may be spread out over 3 weeks, and you get to wrap yourself in these words and these gestures and these emotions of the words and the meaning of the words and the depths that no one will ever get just listening to the piece for 4 minutes or 5 minutes or what have you. Horowitz recorded in his 90s the same ballade that he had recorded 12, 13 times in his career, still looking for the, more layers to uncover. And great art can do that for us. It reveals itself in ever deepening layers of And so it's true for the composer. It will open up part of that untapped creative joy that is yours because it's such a slow process. It's a lot of people come to the compositional process thinking that God gave me this song and I just got out of bed and wrote it down. Now, I have had a few joyful moments of clarity. Thank you, Soli Deo Glory, that I had them, and quickly a song came to me. The Awakening was an example of that. It just poured out of me. But those are rare. Most of the time, composition is a very painstaking and slow, laborious process. In fact, that's where most people lose it. They think that first layer, which is maybe a beautiful melody or a harmonic structure or something, or a text if you're a poet, some kind of good hook, it's just the start. It's the crafting of everything that comes afterwards that is the deepening experience. So it's maybe not quite as romantic as one thinks, because the end result is, nobody sees the sculpture having to chisel away and clean and temper and all of the things that are part of it. But if you are that kind of person who likes the exploring and looking for hidden treasures and are patient enough to contend with the different elements of composition, I think you will be very, very happy spending time this way. Now, knowing that it's impossible to do something like this in an hour, I've expanded this into conferences that I do, 2 a year now, the Composers Symposium, or as we like to call them, the Symposiums. One takes place in June in Atlanta at the Pine Lake Music Center. They have a very nice facility there. We have a 10-year anniversary this year. In the 10 years that we have started the conference, 150 pieces plus pieces we know of have been published and have been adjudicated. And thanks, Krista.
How much are these works?
Oh, well, right now pretty good, I think, to be able to see.
Sorry. Here.
Oh, you are very kind. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Take them back. Oh, it's a tough. He's tough. You have to come back at the end and tell them about or you got someplace else to go?
No, I'm just be hanging around.
Okay, yeah, I would like for you to tell them about what we do. The conference that we just added is at Concordia in Austin, because I know a lot of people from this area. Sometimes Atlanta's, it's an easy hub to get to, but it's still not. It's more than a drive away. And so we're starting a conference this fall in Austin. I think it's in October, and it'll be 3 days of intense things. We'll have Robert Sterling, we have John Parker, we have a number of Heather, I think, is coming. You can check the website and see who our faculty, and it changes every year because not everybody approaches this in the same way. But I've developed a formula that I have used for publishing, and I'm assuming some of you, I know some of you are interested in publishing and have been maybe successful in publishing. But I want to share it with you because it's something I can do in an hour, and I think we can use it as a jumping off place. And I'm not trying to hold myself up as a model of anything, but I do have a system that I have used through the years that might be useful to you. You'll have to work out your own system, because if you don't want to grow up to be like me, that's for sure. We got one of me, and arguably not necessarily a good thing. But I want to share it with you because I do think it has some core value to it. To be successful as a composer in the sacred music arena, I think of it as a triangle. Sometimes I think of it as interlocking circles, but I have trouble drawing that, so we're going to do a triangle today. I like the circles a little bit because they're more dynamic. They suggest motion. Sometimes the triangle is a little more stable, and I'm not so sure that this formula is that stable. Sometimes certain aspects of what I want to share with you take precedence, and this, with the assignment, with the purposefulness of your composition, this changes. But at the top of it, we're going to talk about sacred composing. If you're interested in educational music and pedagogical materials, this will be a different word at the top here. But we're going to use sacred for the sake of our conference here. And I put at the top of this, and you've heard me use these phrases all through the conference in different ways in my introductions, but it's like driving me crazy stuff. You know, I really feel like I need to share this balance thing. Ministry is at the top of it, because everything that we do in sacred music, I know that there is perhaps a school of writing and composing which is more attuned to historical sacred roots, and those are that's an important form too. But I'm talking about kind of what I do, because I can only speak authentically to what it is I do. So ministry has to take a very important apex position there. And over here, I call this artistry. This part of the equation, and artistry is the craftsmanship that you bring to it, that mysterious thing that we understand as musicians, this language of excellence, a language of expression that is, like I say, it's mysterious. We don't really understand it, but we know it when we hear it, don't we? We're in this room, we come to these conferences, and when we are confronted with something that is gloriously done and seems to be perfectly aligned with the words, there's something that washes over us. A well-turned phrase, a beautiful sonic stack of sonority that just seems to match that perfect peace word at the end of the song. And we feel that, and that's artistry. And if it's well done, and each deepening of our commitment to the language we speak, it becomes clearer. The picture becomes more in focus for us. And artistry gets a bad rap sometimes because it's maybe thought of as being vain or inauthentic. But really, it's just a eloquence of the language of music. It's eloquence, and nobody would argue that an orator, a pastor speaking the word with clarity and beauty and understanding, that level of artistry wouldn't be a better thing than somebody who stumbles across it. Now, I'm notwithstanding the power of the Holy Spirit to use Balaam's donkey to communicate truth. I mean, certainly you can call me donkey anytime you want to, because that's why I get to do this. Is still a profound mystery that will be pondered for exactly 10 seconds after I pass. But nonetheless, I am the most surprised person in the universe that I get to do this, and I consider myself extremely blessed because of it. But I know that artistry is sometimes looked on as an elitism, and I don't mean artistry like elitist, like the people who build these towers of musical profundity and try to make us come and worship and bow at that mountain. I'm talking about taking pride in a gracious way, a thankful, a gratitude for these beautiful moments that we are able to participate in. And the more, I was at the Bach Tower in Florida, and there was a simple quote on the wall. It said, "May the works of my hands bring you delight today, O Lord." That kind of attitude to create something beautiful because it honors the Creator, and it's truthful and authentic and genuine to the relationship you have with the Creator. That's artistry to me, creating beauty for those reasons. And then this third triangle I call industry. And this is another bad rap thing because, there is a process by which we deliver information to people that is very, very important. If you look at the ancient trade routes, it's the people who were in charge of those that had a powerful influence on the culture. Anytime two roads intersect, you got a McDonald's. And that is an important reality in how music and ideas are delivered in our culture. and this is called the publishing world. It's called the internet. It's called a lot of different things. In the old ways, it was the trade routes, and spices came this way and that way, and wars were fought, and countries and boundaries, and all those kinds of things. If you look at that, you will understand this has the potential to be noble. It also has the potential to seduce you away from your true calling. So what I like about the pyramid and what I like about the interlocking circles is a sense of balance, a triune balance here: ministry, artistry, and industry. And all three of those things being considered will help you become a better composer in the macro way of looking at these kinds of things. And they will be different. What's wonderful about this too is that they're different for each of us, because we all are called to different ministries. Some of us are in mega churches. I grew up in a small church that had about 12 in the choir on Easter Sunday morning, and probably maybe one or two of them actually read music, and they typically sang from the Broadman hymnal in unison 20 minutes before the worship service. And that was where I was planted. My father was a pastor. My mother was the church pianist, and bring them in, bring them in. And yet, I heard angels sing there, and I fell in love with how music and ministry and music and message could intersect. The intersection of music and message is what sacred composition is all about. And we are living in a culture where this contemporary zeitgeist is very much about performance, because that's what our culture demands, and it's created in our expectations. And I'm not criticizing this necessarily. I'm just making an observation that the idea of having a song implanted in you that you develop over the period of your life, and it's your life song, and it's your talent, is almost lost to us now. You either have to be the best at something, or you don't really need to be doing it. You're wasting your time. And I just don't believe that. I think this is almost a spiritual discipline to write your thoughts and journal who you are as a person. And publishing may be great. I mean, if that happens, wonderful. I mean, but not everybody can get published, or nobody be buying the music, and the industry would go boom. But I still think it's a worthy, calming, insightful, illuminating thing to participate in. And industry, part of it, can mean how are you going to use this to maybe to make money off of it, if it's a decision like that. But it also really means something greater than that. How can I be smart about how I use the tools of the trade, the trade routes that are in place for me in my individual ministry, to better be a communicator. So we're trying to figure out the conduits for getting, and think of the miracle of publishing for a moment, if you will. And this, I'm in charge of 2 publishing companies, and it's a miracle still to me. I've been doing it for 30 years, and I'm still in awe of it. Michael Ware, he wakes up one night and he can't sleep, and he's got this melody in his head. He can't get it out. He's like, and then he finds that these words, "Sing to the Lord a new song," or "Upon the Rock," or whatever it is your next opus is going to be. It's what it's called. Built on the Rock. Built on the Rock. I knew it was kind of Built on the Rock. And so he finds the rhythm that he wants to say, and he jots it down and goes back to sleep, and he's still troubled by it, but he gets into it. He gets up the next morning, he stumbles in with his cup of coffee to the computer, and he tries to capture it. It's not quite right. And yet, over the next period of however long it takes him to put these things down, and each person is different, he finally puts it down. He pours his heart into his pen, his pain into his pen, and he creates this composition. And then, he says, I'm going to try that out with my choir. So he goes and tries it out with the choir. And just the transference from his heart to the page is a miracle enough. Probably he put it from the page to the computer to the printer prints it out. They duplicate it in the Xerox machine. The Xerox machine goes into the choir folder. He tries it out and realizes it doesn't work at all. He's got to go back and rewrite it. And John Nesbeck was the guy that said, the best end of the pencil is the eraser. So, I mean, it's absolutely true. So he rewrites, because rewriting is writing. That's a Robert Sterling quote. And so all of this process, finally he gets something. He says, I'm going to send it to the dummy up at Shawnee Press or Hal Leonard, to see if they will publish it. And guess what? He hits pay dirt. Then the editor gets a hold of it with his red pen, and he starts going, well, we'll take this note, and that's out of our range. And they start applying their own set of triangle values to it, and finally he gets his prints back. Then it goes back to him. It goes to a recording studio where a producer produces the recording. The recording goes through a series of dealers where we stand in front of them and go, please take this piece by Michael Ware. And then after that, it goes out to 40,000 people in a mailer that we design. And then you sit at Alleluia Conference with one of them in your hands and you sing it out and your heart is moved. Then you've got to go through the same process he went through by selling it to your people, teaching it to them, and finally they sing it for the people in the pew and they are moved. Is that, and I probably left out the proofing, the editing, the engraving that we do at the publishing house, the marketing meetings that we go through, designing covers and all of that. And you think about that from his this restless sleep and this little phrase he had. If that's not a miracle, I don't know what is. And sometimes I think about, I've written 15 and published 1,500 pieces, and I go, no wonder I'm so tired and hunkered over like an old man. I'm just 29 years old, and look at me. So the process itself is a slow one, and it is exceedingly trying at times. But the end results are you have somehow, through this miracle of commerce and creativity, been able to pour out your heart in this unusual form, and someone you will never meet, someone you will never know, will be in a pew and a tear will slide out of their eye, or their chest will breathe in when the crescendo happens, or that phrase, built on the rock, will embed itself in a different place in their spirit, and it will become. Come on in. We got some chairs over here. Yep.
Oh, yeah, thanks.
Yeah. So that is the process, and you can't learn it in an hour. You can't even explain it in an hour. But I want you to know that each of these areas are going to be absolutely important for you to be successful, even if it doesn't mean going to publishing, but even just being successful in your own writing for your church or for your own fingers or however it is that you feel you are called to compose. So let's talk a little bit about you now and how you are writing, what your goals are for your own creative opportunities. Let's go around the room. Are you writing anything now? Is it a dream?
No, I write worship songs.
Really? Okay, I'm curious. Do you have one with you?
Not with me.
Well, can you sing one by heart?
I can sing the chorus of one.
Just sing it for me.
My God is a warrior. My God is a fearless God who saves. My God is the God who is worthy of praise. My God is the God who... whatever. I don't remember.
I like it already. Now, where did you... Tell us about your process. How do you write when you write?
Honestly, I work as a worship leader at a day camp.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm with kids all day, and so when I just need to take a break and need to be refreshed, I will go and I will pray, and then the Lord will say something to me, and I write down what he says, and then somehow it turns into a song.
You ought to be teaching the class. That's exactly, you got it down. That's the way it's done. Wonderful. How do you write it down? By hand?
I write everything down by
In
hand.
a lead sheet form?
Usually I'll write the lyrics down, and then I'll, depending on if I have a piano near or a guitar near, I will pick up one of them and write out chords.
Fascinating. Wonderful. Well, you certainly got the ministry part down, and it sounds like you're a pretty good songwriter already. I just like the chorus. It has structure, has form. If I were to look at you and go, da la 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 la, what would you say back to me? There's no wrong. La 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 la. Just answer me. What should I answer?
Sing something back to
Yeah.
me? Oh,
Sing back.
okay.
I'll do another one. La 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 la.
La 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 la.
La 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 la.
La 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 la.
songwriter.
Yes.
You know why? Because you're using the abstract language of music, and it's got structure, it's got phrase. Now, whether that was the absolute perfect resolution, there is no answer to it. This is all sort of crazy stuff anyway, you know? But everybody in this room realized you have a gift right there. That's how simple it is, and yet it's beyond complexity. Layers and layers and layers, but most people don't realize that at its very origins, its genesis moment, it's very simple. And then the journey begins. So you have everything it takes to be that. Everybody in this room has it, by the way. Do you think, even if you would be a little, not quite as bold as as Brianna. Brianna, thank you for being my guinea pig. But I'm going to show you that you have the ability to do this. You were born with it. I do this with 18 months old, and they always do it right. I'm going to clap a rhythm. You tell me what the song is. Just clap 3 times, guys. 3 times, space, 3 times. How did you know that was Jingle Bells? Because you were born to be creative. Musically creative. You come with this enhanced rhetorical, 18-month-olds do it. I think you try it with your 18 months old. Now, sometimes they say 3 blind mice if they've been singing that song. But it's the ability to recognize patterns, or as we would call them if we've got theory backgrounds, motives, and develop those motives so that the piece has diversity and it also holds together. It is constructed in such a way that there is diversity and yet it holds together. The motives are the cement, the DNA of a composition. And I was listening today to the composer favorites and I was thinking, wow, these composers really get it. There were motives, that little interval leaps and things that they took through a series of harmonic changes, held the piece together. It strung us along by the heartstrings in such a beautiful, beautiful way. So that's one of the things. Tell me about the writing or arranging that you do.
Very small scale, like I'll take something that someone else has written
And elaborate.
Rewrite it for my choir, a harmonic structure that works better for us or something like that.
Excellent. Oh no, that's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, because the writing out of the need of the moment or rearranging. I used to get in trouble with my piano teachers because I tried to improve Beethoven all the time. You know, hey, I think this would sound good with octaves. You know? There's Joseph. Don't try to improve on Beethoven, you crazy nut.
It's a joke in my choir. If we get to a piece and I don't change something, it's like, oh, she didn't change anything. You know.
Well, it only means that you're listening and responding. And as a composer, if you are not flexible, if you believe that your way is the only way to do it, I must say to you, you're foolish. And I would say that to Leonard Bernstein if he was standing there. Because he, if at his core, would have to acknowledge that it is such a mystery. And that you don't know whether you have found the perfect sweet spot, because if you stay with it another week, it might have gone on and been something else. And that some of the compositions that I have written with such care and clarity, when I heard a great interpreter breathe in a different place, or carry a phrase, or arch a phrase in a different way that I never even thought of, it makes me better. So I didn't do that. Here is something to realize about composition. It is not a museum piece. The composition that you write is not what you put on the page. It is what is performed. It is a performing art, especially in sacred music. Who cares if we hang it on the wall or if it's under a piece of glass somewhere? That's not what music is. Would you not agree? Music is what is resonating and echoing in that sanctuary at that moment. It dies instantly after that. It goes away, and the moment it's like being hungry again. You have to continue to reinforce it and to reinvigorate it to life. It's an animate thing. This is what music is. It's not like a painting that hangs there forever in that same place, or architecture until it crumbles is there for people to walk through and around and to enjoy. A piece of music has to be drug out every time and performed. And here's another thing about composition you will discover. It is a partnership. It is an absolute partnership between, well, the divine, your creative impulse, and your abilities to write, and the recreator of the music, which is the conductor or the music minister. I know that if I don't enable you as a director to sound good, my composition is at that moment not good. If it allows you to maximize the abilities of the people who are around you and bring them to a place where they find new worship clarity, new musical worth, whatever the goal is for the composition, then I have done my job. And it's a job that has to be recreated with another person and another group. I will go tomorrow after our last session, and I will fly to Philadelphia, where I will do one of the pieces that I performed here already with another group of people, and it'll be completely different. And I will be so insecure if it doesn't quite work as well as it does with you guys. Everything sounded pretty good here, but there may be challenges there. I may not have as many outcomes. That is why you can't be a control freak, in my opinion, and be a composer and be an effective communicator. You might write great music, but you're going to be miserable if you. What is it? Princess Leia says, "The more that you squeeze star systems, the more they will slip through your fingers, Vader." Well, that's the truth. The more you hold on to your compositions like that with tight fists, the more that you will lose that joy of actually being useful to another person. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So I'm glad that you are writing out of your need and arranging because you have certain characteristics in your group. I do the same thing with my own compositions. So, Michael, tell us about your new things. You've got several things in our Shawnee catalog, and a brand new one I'm getting ready to record.
And one thing, and then the new one. I'm interested, especially kind of in just seeing into the world of the industry in publishing and that kind of thing.
It is a fascinating world, yeah, it is, and it's a monster. I admit it's it's a necessary evil to bring, because a lot of times that inserts learning to dance with that part of the triangle can be annoying at times, but it's also again, even though it's not a set situation, because each publisher has its own congregation.
Yeah.
Look at it that way. If I know I'm going to be writing for a church that worships in a very contemporary style, and I write under 10 different names to help me articulate that in the industry, I will choose syncopations and styles and techniques that I know will resonate with their language of worship. Again, it's a partnership. And publishers are very much like churches in that way. Each of us have our own, many of us have multiple personalities because we have different divisions or brands that you can contribute to. As you begin to submit your music to publishers, it would be worth your nickel to come to conferences like this or to get on their reading sessions. We have one called the Inside Club, where you can get Hal Leonard and Shawnee Press for $50 a year, and you actually get a copy of every piece of music, plus a planning guide. And that planning guide is that's your key to what we're looking for, because every year I have the same chart in front of me: 6 Advent pieces, 12 Christmas pieces, 3 All Saints. These are the slots. These are the publishing slots that we must fill. Palm Sundays, Ascension, Trinity, the church year, and then not only that, but subjects like missions, stewardship, grace, communion, Thanksgiving, music appreciation, all of these different categories, hymn concertatos, opening gestures, final blessings, so many, and they're all in the back of this publication. We list them, and they are very close to the charts we use in the publishing company. Now, here's your deal, is we have staff writers, and a lot of those slots get filled instantly with assignments to Heather Sorensen and to the Joe Martins and the Dan Forests and whoever else is staff. The rest of the people are speculating you would fit into that category because you sent in composition. It was an SAB, as I recall. Is that correct? And guess what? One of our categories wasn't filled with SAB. You came in with a solid piece. You always come in with solid pieces.
And that's what you were looking for
at that moment. And that's the reason you hit Payherd. And how do you know that? You don't. I don't even know it, and I'm the keeper of the book because I couldn't tell you right now what we're missing.
Like you told me at the time when I talked to you on the phone, it was fell in the category of a neo-spiritual, and Hal Leonard had success with that. And I didn't know you were looking for that.
But maybe that was a divine serendipity.
Are there any of those categories that are lacking in the submissions that you get?
SAB particularly. SAB because, Marquets, when we do SAB of a Marquets piece, it's because we have bestseller of Marks, and we think we can do an SAB. And so to get an SAB original is nice, or a two-part mixed. I broke into the music business, just a little bit of my own technique, writing for youth choirs, because youth choirs were really big in the early 90s, and some of the bigger composers spent time, kind of writing for the bigger ensembles, and I would have loved to do that too, because, it's who wouldn't like to write that kind of music, but I started writing kind of not really rock and roll sort of things, but things with a little gentle feeling of contemporary at that time. And yet they were very choral and had, some four-part writing and things like that. And so for the first 2 or 3 years of my writing, people thought of me as a youth choir composer. And finally, Shawnee Press said, you probably don't want to get pigeonholed in because we know you're classically trained and all this. Could you write something, bigger? And I went, yeah. And then I got out of that mold that they put me in. Nonetheless, finding what the need is, that's the industry part of finding more about where you can be useful to this crazy conduit called publishing will enable instantly your success, because you probably sent, I almost venture, I think I remember one, O Little Town of Bethlehem. Mm-hmm. It was a great piece too. Probably as good if you wanted to really look at them. I mean, it was good as that piece. But we already got a Holy Grail. I mean, I love that Monty Python thing says, we search for the Holy Grail. Sorry, we already have one. I just love that. Each castle he goes to, we got one. That's no problem. Well, you try to write the Lord's Prayer or the Lord is my shepherd, and it better be better than the original, or you're not going to get any success. Now, if I wrote it, this is unfair, but it's the truth, because I have a little bit of a name. It's not a good one, but it's a name. I would probably get a second look at singing the Lord's Prayer, but I haven't done that because we already got one. And it's pretty good. Every once in a while, though, I finally tackled For God So Loved the World and a few of the, when you get a good idea and you think you've got some new angle on it, you take a chance on something like that. But it's a good example of your situation, because we had 2 really good submissions, but one of them we needed, and the other one we already had, basically. And so you got the phone call, the good phone call on one, you got the bad phone call on the other. Maybe some of you have experienced the agony of the rejection letter. Anybody in here gone through that process? Yes. And I think Dan Forrest said it beautifully when at the luncheon meetings, when he said, it's not a reflection necessarily on the quality of music. It is absolutely a reflection on what is needed at the time, because that's just what we look for. The committee that reviews things is fully aware of what they're looking for. I have to tell them that, because I'm the keeper of the crop. I don't review the manuscripts, but I do balance the crop. So I send messages, this is what my needs are. And of course they know if they run across the next Majesty and Glory of His Name, and it's not one of the categories, they're going to, treat it kindly. But I just want to explain to you, if you go through those frustrations, some of the things you're up against, and how you should not see that as a closed door. Now, it could be that the piece needs work. They don't look at it also as, it's perfect the way it is. It may need an eraser. And unfortunately, the publishers don't give you any feedback on that. So, but if you get rejected 4 or 5 times, you might go back and say, what I got to do to make this little bells and whistles, analyze it a little more. What kind of writing have you been doing? Through the years?
Over the years, I was just thinking about out of need, particularly back when I was doing the music for the Oklahoma Indian Baptist Assembly. We needed a song, and over the first couple of days, I listened to a couple of old men who had come across the Trail of Tears as children, and the stories were just unbelievable. And on the 3rd night, I couldn't sleep, so I got up and wrote Little Drops of Blood, Jesus hanging on the cross, dripping his blood to the explained how the blood was dripping from the saddle, and the people would fall and they'd bury them in place, and another one would fall from the saddle. And so I wrote that based on that, and they loved it.
Oh, see, because they connected with it.
They connected with it. They
with it.
understood it was written for them.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah, it's that sort of thing. Right now I'm working on, I've got an old English hymnal that I found somewhere in a bookstore with old text.
Yeah.
They're great old texts.
I love those old
Yeah.
English. I've got about
So
a
what I'm
dozen of them.
trying to do is to take some of those old texts and write some new material to it, some new musical material using that old text.
Wonderful.
And so I'm working on that, that will fit into the Presbyterian Church.
Yeah, I hear you. Of course, yes, because that's your ministry. That's where you are.
Something, and the church where I am is an older congregation, and they like the old hymns, which is fine.
Yeah.
No problem there. So I found 500 of them, these texts and some tunes that went with it that nobody in the world has ever heard of from 1800.
Can I use this as a jumping off place? How many of you write lyrics?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, I mean, this is something that I've
Yeah.
started doing and I've enjoyed very much. I take a hymn. I take a hymn like let's say. Man, I'm running out of space here. Guide me, O thou great Jehovah. Okay, let's take thou. Sorry. Great. Help me. Can you write Jehovah over there?
Yeah.
Okay. And I'll erase this to give us some space.
Oh, you got a lefty writer.
It's like my
Yeah.
son, Jonathan.
There you go.
He's the only one in there. Right mind in our family. All right. And then what I'll do is I'll make a matrix kind of a puzzle here, and you can use synonyms and antonyms, or it could be like a Rorschach test. This is the first thing that drops into your mind. So we got guide. What's another name for guide?
Lead.
Lead. Train.
Follow.
Follow. Good.
Push.
What?
Push.
Push. Shepherd. Huh? Map. Good. Me. You. Us. That's right. You got it. Them. Thou.
God, Lord.
Well, let's go to great. Give me great. That's the opposite. Tender.
Great and mighty.
Mighty.
Wonderful.
Wonderful. Yep. There you go.
Powerful.
Powerful. Awesome. Awesome sauce. Gentle. Yep. There you go. Okay, and you take over. Let's see. Jehovah, Lord, Jesus, Christ, Lamb, Savior, Messiah, God, Shepherd.
Wow, I missed like 4 of those, I think.
Jesus Christ, Lamb, Savior, Shepherd,
King.
King. Good. Okay, that gives us the thing. Now, remember we started with the hymn, "Guide me, all thou great Jehovah." Let's start playing connect the dots. Lead us, mighty King. And when I did it, after about 12 of these, I came up with shepherd us, oh, gentle lamb. Shepherd us, O gentle lamb. Lead me by the quiet streams. You see, that idea of the shepherd and the lamb on the outside, the opposites of those things, ended up being a really compelling hook. And it's done well. People have resonated with it. It's a very simple pastoral type of quality, so I've tried to match the music to the title. And I discovered it by just a simple brain exercise of coming up with that. You can come up with others. Follow, train us, wonderful Savior. And you'll find one that just resonates. You can these lists get longer and longer and longer, and you'll find your way. Just think about all those old hymns you've got in those hymnals, how you could do that and find your power words to help you construct a great text.
And they had great power words of the 18th and 19th centuries.
That's right.
Things that we don't even use anymore. There's words I didn't even hardly
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's right. That's right. So those are ways of taking things that are already in existence and teaching yourself to go searching for those power phrases and words, hooks, if you want to go use a Nashville term, kind of an industry term, but I call that a lyric scaffold, and trying to because you're building a house of words, a house of song, and these are the building blocks. So that's a little, just a little secret insider Joe technique for getting off of square one when you're trying to come up with a good text. You know. Right. Anybody else have an interesting process that they're going through right now with their compositions that we might could use to jump off and create some learning opportunities this fine day? Yes.
I'll share one.
Sure.
Quite a few years ago, we were talking about in our praise team when we were doing Sunday night service, we were tired of the same old Advent candle lighting song, and we'd alternate between a couple, and it motivated me to come up with something different. In fact, on a trip between Council Bluffs and Des Moines along Interstate 80, my wife and I wrote the lyrics while I'm driving and she's writing. And then we came up with the music to it, and we used it for quite a few years. 5 verses for each of the, and then one for Christmas Eve, and used that for each time when we did the candle lighting thing. And you're right, the first time you do it, you hang yourself out there and you're nervous that this thing's going to crash and burn, but
and sometimes they do.
Yeah.
Sometimes they do.
And it was tweaked a little bit year after year, but
wonderful. Yeah, well, I just wrote a cantata about the 5 candles of Advent because I also found out that we didn't have a lot of material for treble voices, which is another specialty thing. And I was searching for a title, and I came up with "The Light Before Christmas" as a little bit of a hooky title, and it's got a song for each of the candles, and what you're observing is, if you observe it in your own community of faith and your own ministry, chances are that same need exists elsewhere too. And Advent was not really one that we have a lot of hymns. I mean, you think about it, there's not that many hymns. So in my cantatas, if you've noticed, 45 cantatas, the first part of the cantata is me retooling carols to not give away the incarnation, but writing Advent text to familiar melodies, so that the cantata feels like a Christmas cantata because it's got melodies that are holiday oriented. But the text I've written, instead of the Coventry Carol, Lully Lulay, I wrote "When Will Messiah Come." It's just rewriting text so that they can, a choir director can get all the melodies and all the tunes in there. But and then the incarnation happens, and the regular carols can be presented normally. But we have not that many Advent standards, evergreens, if you will, and that's just another little clue there. There's 5 Sundays for me to sell music on, 4 Sundays. I guess the 5th one is I guess it's Christmas Eve. Yeah. So there's 4 or 5 opportunities for a sale, when Christmas only has really the one.
In our church, we get to do one Christmas anthem a year, and that's it.
Yeah.
And then we could, if we did a Christmas anthem during Advent, my pastor would probably pass out and just, I don't know what he'd do. He'd freak. I know his eyeballs would turn in his head.
What church are you at?
Episcopal Church.
Yes.
St. Philip's Episcopal Church.
I hardly ever sold to the Episcopal Church until I understood you're like swimming with handcuffs on, and sometimes, right. And yet it's some of the most beautiful symbols, and some of the most it's not a negative thing necessarily. It's actually it's just hard once you learn it. Then you say, the whole Song of the Shadows Tenebrae service was based on Lou Kirby, who was an Episcopal pastor in Delaware, and was also the head editor of Shawnee. I have his job now. When he passed or had a stroke. But he taught me everything, and he said, I said, Lou, I want to know, because he was trained in the Baptist seminary, so he understood me. And then I said, but I want to learn more, and he told me about the No Alleluia, and my cantata called "A Time for Alleluia" is an Easter cantata that doesn't have Alleluia until the final word of the cantata is Alleluia, and that's where Empty Now comes from, which is, so it's this whole journey with no Alleluia, and the final word is Alleluia, and you actually perform that on Easter Sunday. So it's a cantata that spans over the weekend. But he taught me all about that and about holding back the trumpets and I said, oh my gosh, this is fantastic. I love this. And so I wrote a cantata called Song of the Shadows that obeyed that and taught me some things that I needed to experience. And it was my most successful to date, most successful Lenten cantata. So it came out of Lou, sharing with me some things I didn't know. Sometimes expanding your horizons in that way can energize you, because you never learn anything original from a mirror. And we tend to want to do that. We just want to hold up the mirror and go, "Oh, you're so pretty," and not in a bad way necessarily, but we don't get outside our sanctuary walls, which is why I really encourage churches sometimes to take tours, because when you go out, you realize we are many voices in one song. By the way, that was my phrase that I came up with, because I knew I wanted this to be a diversified gathering. And when you go off, and even into another country, the first time you go, you feel kind of like, oh, I don't know, I don't want to offend anybody, I'm going to cause an international incident here. You feel awkward. But then, now that I've gone 6 times to Ireland and all these things, they're just like us. They're totally just like us, and they want to know. They're as hungry for our information as we are for them, and it's just like a composer congregational relationship. It's the same type of thing. Every performer needs an audience, and every audience needs a performer. And once we start having that kind of respect, this is usually a ding-dang beautiful experience. If you know.
The payoff is when people like us walk up to you and say, "This number blessed me," or "It blessed my congregation." That's the payoff.
Nothing like it. And you know what? I have a number 1 song for years in Korea, and when I get a little Korea, it's a wedding song. It's called "Without Love We Have Nothing." It's with Shawnee Press, if you want to take a look at it. But they translate it to Korean. They call it the Korean wedding song. And when I get these little videos of these Asian brides who have this song sung at their ceremonies, and they have big choirs that sing it, or they'll sing it to each other, and I go, what? You think the miracle of getting it published is a miracle? Wait until you think you get something from Korea, and here it's the centerpiece of a wedding, and I've never been to Korea. My father, before he passed, he was a pastor in small churches his whole life, and he retired. And I said, "Dad, one day we were just sitting around, and I said, if you could turn your 50-minute sermon into a 45 words or 3 verses and a chorus, you might be able to be a songwriter." He goes, "You reckon?" I said, "Yeah, I'll help you." And he wrote, before he passed, he wrote a lot of texts, but 21 of them got published. And I still remember the first royalty check he got. Because I set them to music and they got published. And he added it up. He had done the math on it, and it said 56,000 copies of music he had sold. And he didn't understand it. He said, "No, I don't understand this." He says, "I can't believe they're paying me to do that." I said, "Well, Dad, that's just, you're going to get your cut. Just like every other composer." And he goes, "Well, 56, is that 1,000? I said, "Yeah." He says, "What does that mean?" I said, "Well, this little piece of music has 56,000 people sang your words. That's what that means." And plus, since most people Xerox things illegally, probably a lot more than that.
Never.
And you know what? He just started weeping.
Yeah.
And I go, "Dad, what's wrong?" He goes, "In my whole life, I never preached for 50,000 people." He says, I would never dream of touching with my thoughts that many people.
I have a song published in the Spanish hymnal that I didn't know it was published in Spanish. Yeah. So I take a group to Mexico, Durango, got down there, and the kids were singing my song in Spanish. I didn't know it in Spanish.
Did you just want to explode with joy?
And I sang it in English. They go, "Yeah, but sing it in Spanish." I don't know in Spanish. I never saw Spanish.
is
So I said,
hilarious.
you teach it to me in Spanish, and I'll teach it to you in English. And so we did that over a week period of time. It was fun.
Isn't this a joyful thing we get to do? Listen, I would love for you to come to a symposium because this is kind of thing, and you present your piece, and it's like American Idol. We sit around and criticize it, and you go away at just an empty shell of a person. It is
When is the one in Austin?
It's in October, I believe.
Well,
It's in
can we?
that she brought pamphlets.
Oh yeah, they're right there.
Oh, here we go. Yes, this composer symposium. Oh my gosh, thank you, Don Johnson.
Who
Young.
needs one?
Don
Tell
Johnson.
you
Young.
what,
All right.
have
Yep.
somebody, yeah,
That's
yeah.
on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesdays.
Yeah, well,
Yes, and then there's a little reading session for choir directors on the fourth day, but we didn't put it on there because we're at another conference. We didn't feel like it was, we didn't want to do that. But there will be a component for choir directors right after that, but just one day, and mainly this is a chance. And it tells you who Joel Rainey's going to be there. David Angerman, Robert Sterling, who by the way is genius. I mean, he is a brilliant teacher, and I highly recommend you go to those sessions because he can open windows of understanding. He's plain talking in terms of he's an industry guy. He's got Dove Awards and all this kind of thing, Grammy nominations, but he knows how to break down songwriting in ways. And he's written a beautiful book, which Pine Lake Music can get for you. It's called The Craft of Christian Songwriting. And I would highly recommend it. It's a beautiful read. His jumping off spot has to do with Jesus' chairs. Have you ever thought about it? Can you imagine being the guy across the street with your furniture shop across from Joseph and Jesus' furniture shop? And so his idea, what kind of craftsmanship would the Lord have brought to his carpentry? And I thought, I just couldn't believe what a freaky thought that is. I mean, to think of Jesus as creative, the creator of the universe, the one who created the tree, what things would he have brought to carpentry? And to me, that thought alone blows my mind. And so I think it challenges us all to dig a little deeper. Krista, you're here. You've been patient. Tell us about where we're going. What are our new tours? Are we going to Hawaii, aren't we?
We're going to Hawaii in October of 2015.
Oh, suffering for Jesus.
Just suffering. Suffering for Jesus is right.
Love it.
And
Well, first we're going to Italy next April, 10 days after Easter, so you get your Easter music and programs out of the way and head to Italy on April 15th, Tax Day. And there's the main part of the tour and then an optional extension to Venice, and then the Hawaii in October 2015, and in 2016 in the summer we are headed to England and France. We'll sing a couple places in London. Joe can tell you those.
Wesley Chapel. You haven't done anything till you've sung Wesley's words in the pulpit, in the very choir loft that they were premiered in. You see the desk he wrote, "Hark the Herald Angels Sing," Jesus, Lover of My Soul, Christ the Lord is here today.
I never get through it.
Every time I've done it half a dozen times, and I just can't fathom it. And can it be? I think I'll write "And Can It Be" today. I mean, it's a great Suffolk Cathedral there in London. We're going to head on down towards the White Cliffs of Dover, catch a ferry, go over to France, northern part of France, where a certain event happened called D-Day, and we're going to sing on the 4th of July at the American Cemetery in Normandy. And we already have
That's 16.
On Omaha, we have a picnic lunch on Omaha Beach. Yep.
That's 16.
That's 2016.
Okay.
And if that doesn't move you, you are unmovable because it's an amazing thing to see those. And I guess that'll maybe some of the last times that some of our veterans from World War II will be there. Yeah. But on 4th of July, here they are in their wheelchairs, and it's so powerful. So anyway, that's thank you, Krista, for sharing. We've got a booth in the
We're over.
in the Risai, yeah.